Welcome to the Encouragement Engineering Podcast, where we help people combat the negativity that inundates our daily lives with a positive perspective and positive action. Today's guest is Susie Hayes. Susie Hayes has 2 master's degrees in education and counseling and over 40 years of experience as a psychotherapist, life and business coach, hypnotist, teacher, speaker, and author who helps people become and stay freed from stuck by showing them how to access internal resources they never knew they had to create what they never knew they could, combining coaching, counseling, and hypnosis. She is also an award-winning author of the book Freed from Stuck, Dare to Cross the Bridge Beyond Grief, Trauma, and Self-Sabotage to Discover Lasting Change Now. So if you would, please welcome to the show, Susie Hayes. Susie, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. It is an honor to join you in this conversation, Bob. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, great. Well, why don't we start out with, so the audience understands who you are and how you got to where you are. Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I don't
Probably
know
the hardest question in the whole thing.
I was going to say, wow, that it's such an open-ended question. I'm not even sure quite where to start with that. I'm from Denver, Colorado. I'm a Denver native, which is actually quite rare. And I love Denver, haven't ever seen a reason to not live here, although you can tell by my background that I am a lover of all things beach. So I like that about my life experience. I've been doing what I've been doing professionally for over 40 years. I really love what I do. And I just enjoy, even at this time in my life, being able to contribute and participate and engage with people who are really enjoying their journey and are looking to grow and thrive and heal and live in peace and joy. And that's kind of what I'm about.
It's interesting. You're kind of the opposite of what society is giving us these days. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. And I obviously am pretty optimistic in my view, because I do believe in the incredible resources that we have inside of ourselves to create our lives. And we live in an environment that is so freighted in fear.
Yeah.
And so if there's any time where we need the positive message that you are bringing to our world, it's now.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And you too. I mean, that's the work you do is so interesting. And if we can, let's get into that, because I find it interesting. I mean, our current times, maybe there are a lot of people feeling stuck. They don't know whether they're coming or going. They're, like you said, they're stuck with fear. Getting people unstuck. I mean, what causes that? Tell us more about that, if you would.
Well, I understand being stuck to be any experience in our life where we are not living fully in the way that we want to, but that we don't really know how to get out of where we're at.
Right.
Like if we knew how to do it differently, to do it better, we would. But there are times in our life for all of us where we struggle to figure out what to do, what to change. And so being stuck is that place where we just feel frustrated and helpless, sometimes hopeless. And it's really a signal to us that something needs to change for us.
And that's a good point. Something needs to change. I mean, I always, when you say stuck, my head thinks in pictures. So I think of a Jeep stuck in the mud and the wheels just spinning. And if you don't do anything different, it's still going to just spin and throw the dirt. So that idea that you need to change something, how does that affect people when they say, yeah, well, I know I need to change. I just don't know what. I could almost hear those answers. And I'm sure you hear those a lot.
It means that there is something it means that something needs to change in how you're approaching the stuckness.
Okay.
It's the old adage, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you get.
Right.
So you have to, I think, first of all, believe that change is possible.
Yeah.
You have to believe, or at least begin to believe, that you deserve something better. And you have to be willing to be curious, to ask different questions, better questions.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to be open to whatever that might mean in terms of the change process.
And it's always interesting when people talk about change, it's that idea of fear comes into play because they don't know what's coming. You know, they want to take that next step, but they want to see the whole picture first. How do you help people get over that? Because that's the excitement of life, is going after that change and knowing, okay, I don't know what's next, but it could be exciting. It could be not so exciting, but you know, if I don't try, I don't gain anything. How do you help them get to that next step without having to see the whole map, if you will?
We are designed in such a way to stay with what's familiar, not necessarily what's comfortable, but what's familiar to us, because we kind of know how to navigate it. So, for example, people will sometimes stay in an abusive relationship because they at least know how to do that.
Right.
But the idea of actually being in a relationship that is safe and loving and intimate and satisfying is unfamiliar. And that can be scary. It's like, I wouldn't know how to do that. I wouldn't know how to experience that. So part of what is really important in order to be able to make change is the recognition of the level of pain that you're in. And the more intense the pain, the more likely we are to want to change.
Yeah.
But there also has to be some hope of some vision, and I don't mean that just visually, but there has to be some hope that the change can occur and that you can get there, and trusting that you can figure it out, even in the midst of uncertainty. Because you're absolutely right. It's the journey of uncertainty is what brings vitality to our life. And we're afraid of that. Understandably so, because we value safety. Yeah. So we kind of have to figure out how to make change in a way that feels most safe to us, and yet also allows us to keep moving into what might be unknown into the future.
Now, it's interesting because you always hear about our brain being, you know, that the idea of protecting ourselves, like you said, the comfortable, it's fear, stay away from the fear. That's our, if you will, I forget what they call it, our old brain, if you will, that, you know, was protecting ourselves from a saber-toothed tiger or something. And that's still ingrained in our mind. But yet we don't have that. I mean, the fear could, like you said, it could be psychological, could be physical, which I always pray for people in those scenarios that it gets better. But is there a way to help people maybe use their brain differently to get out of that idea of we're not being chased by something that's really going to kill us? And some of the fear, I'm not saying all of it, but some of the fear can be played in our head, and that movie in our head needs to change.
Yes, and so there are a couple pieces to that I think that you've identified that are really important. We're wired instinctively to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
And that happens most powerfully at an unconscious level. So we develop patterns to protect ourselves with the best information that we have at that point in time.
Right. And
so in making change, one of the things that's really important is that we can, through the neuroplasticity of the brain, right, we can create new grooves in our brain to develop new habits. But those old grooves do not go away. They might diminish in terms of we're not accessing them as much, so they're not as active.
Right.
But they were designed instinctively.
Yeah.
And so we have to appreciate and honor that, because what often happens then is that points of trauma or loss will often cause us to go into a default pattern. So we need to just appreciate that that's how our brain works. We're going to go wherever that default pattern takes us to be safe, to recover, to recuperate. So that being said, we appreciate that that instinctive system is wired into us with regard to how our nervous system works. We also know that by accessing the resources of our mind in combination with our heart, we can make better decisions. We can develop strategies. We can put plans into place that will create new patterns of habit in order to change.
Right. That's good. There's possibility then, and it's interesting. You offer hope. I mean, think of it that way. I love having that sunshine of hope in our lives. How do you help people? I mean, you mentioned obstacles on some of your information in your website. What are some of the greatest obstacles people might have to overcome when they need to make these changes?
Obstacles can be both external and internal.
Mm-hmm.
Externally, sometimes if we are going to respect a change that needs to take place for us, it's going to require a change externally. It may mean that we have to leave our job. It may be that we have to leave a relationship. Mm-hmm. It may mean that we have to move to a different location. Sometimes when we make changes, it will impact dynamics and relationships around us.
Right.
And that in itself can be very scary and very painful. And we're wired to stay in the tribe.
Yeah.
We're wired to belong, right? We all want to belong. And again, that's part of our instinct of survival. And so if in our tribe, whatever that is, there are certain values or beliefs or behaviors that are held that we know are not serving us, it may require that there are going to be some external obstacles to that. We also have the internal obstacles, which are really related most powerfully to how we see the world.
Right.
What we believe about ourselves, what we believe about others, and what we believe about the world in general. So those are sometimes the greatest challenges, because it requires that we go inside and evaluate and assess those beliefs that are no longer serving us. And sometimes that's really hard, because then that can also cause challenges externally.
Right.
So it can be either and or both.
Okay. Now, again, I go to pictures and I think, some of these changes you have to make, it's like cleaning out the garage. You got to move that stuff because it's either rotting in the corner or it's just stuff you don't need anymore. And it sounds like, I don't want to put it too simply, because I know there's more complexities in every situation. It's kind of like that. You've got to change the mind, like you said, those mindsets that aren't serving you anymore. That's like getting rid of that old box that's been sitting in the garage for 10 years, and you've opened the box once. You really don't even know what's in the box. Are you going to go through it, or are you going to just get rid of it? Some good concepts there. And again, it's an idea that I think it's important that people understand we can change. There is hope in most situations, in any situations. I think, I would hope there's, if you will, hope in every situation. But it's a good reminder to people that, things will require that change is something that is required to make a difference and move forward in your life. Tell us about your 5 steps in your Freed method. I'm curious about that. I'd like to hear more about that if you could, because that's the basis of your book, right?
It is, and I do want to speak to that, but I would like to respond to the example that you just gave, because I
Okay.
think there's some real treasures in that. As you were talking, I was thinking about 5 years ago, I moved from a large home to a smaller home.
Uh-huh.
And the idea was, well, you do some purging, but then later you're going to like, well, I'll get out in that garage and I'll finish purging those boxes, right? So you set in place a decision. Well, I will purge one box a month, and by the end of the year, I'll have the garage all organized.
Yeah.
Some of those boxes are still sitting there.
Yeah.
Why is that? See, and this is why when you were saying that, I thought, oh, that's really curious. Because unless I'm searching for something in the garage
Yeah.
and I can't find it, the pain isn't great enough for
Yeah.
me to move those boxes away. So I think that's really important. We can look at our lives and say, I need to make these changes. But more often than not, it is really pain or necessity, something that happens that says, you've got to stop and attend to this. So I think
Yeah.
that's really important to appreciate about how we respond to change, because we may think we need to make changes, but until it's emotionally activated in us that we really need to make the change, we have a tendency to put some things off. So I think that's important to appreciate just about our human experience.
Yeah.
And to then talk about, how do we do that? If we've identified something in our life that isn't working, how do we go about creating that change? And I identified 5 elements that are essential for creating change and sustaining change. And I use the acronym FREED, freed from stuck. And the first, in this metaphor of crossing a bridge from stuck to freed from stuck, is F, and that is facing the bridge. And what that is actually identifying what is the unattended need? What is the point of pain? What is it that needs to change? And we have to get clear about that. And we have to be able to be honest about that. And we have to look at that straightforwardly and say, this is what needs to change, and this is why. So that's the first point, is really identifying what is it that really needs to change. What is the need?
Okay.
The second is R, which is recognize the bridge. And that is about looking across the bridge at where we want to be, where we believe we want to be. And the task is really about creating as vivid as possible a vision of what our lives will be when we arrive at that destination. The more vivid it is, the more emotionally charged it is, the more it fuels us to cross that bridge. Now, some people think in visualization, others think more sensory. So if you have difficulty picturing it in your mind about where you want to go, you can imagine, how will it feel when I get there?
Right.
So that's very, very important, because it helps us in that journey across the bridge. The first E, which is embrace the bridge, is really about identifying the challenges or obstacles that might be there for us, developing a strategy, a plan that's going to be realistic and doable, and something that we can invest in.
Okay.
The next E is exit the bridge, and this is the element in change that we don't talk about very often, but is so essential, is to appreciate that whenever we make a change, we're going to have to let go of something that's no longer serving us. And that means we're going to grieve. We don't talk about that because nobody likes to talk about grief. It's the most difficult human task. And to the degree that we love is the degree that we grieve. Or to put it another way, the more that we are attached emotionally, the harder it is to let go.
Right.
And so when we let go, it's going to require that we grieve. and that we honor that this is indeed saying goodbye to what is no longer going to be in our best interest.
Right.
Then the D is arriving at the destination, which means accomplishing the goal, creating the new habit, developing the new relationship, whatever it is that you're desiring in your own heart for a better quality of life. But it isn't just about arriving at the destination. It's also about destiny, which I see as understanding and discovering our purpose along the way to the destiny or to the destination, meaning that change is a transformational process.
Right.
And if we do it well, we're going to get more in touch with who we are, what we truly believe, what serves us best, what brings us joy, how do we contribute in life. All of these things potentially emerge in the change process. So it isn't just getting to where we want to go.
Right.
It's about being who we're really meant to be. And hopefully, if change happens well, and that's not easy, but it happens well, it means that we're going to discover that as well.
And that's a great point, because the trip isn't just the destination, just getting there. You know, you got to have fun on vacation, if you will. You're going to have enjoyment. You're going to experience things. And like you said, that change, realize who you are going to be. I think that's a big piece of it. After any type of change, you will be different.
Yeah.
And accepting that and growing into that. I mean,
yes,
great concept there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is growing into it.
Yeah.
That is what transformation is. It's about expansion.
Yeah.
And that is what our lives are meant to be. We're supposed to live in an expansive life to become more of who we are.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. That is so awesome.
It is totally awesome. I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah.
That is great. Wow. Well, what type of results do people see after getting unstuck? And do they last? I mean, the smile on your face, I'm sure there's some good stories you got of people that have made some great changes. So fill us in.
It's very important that to appreciate and recognize that we can all create change.
Yeah.
The greatest challenge is often sustaining the change and building on the change. And this is why at the point of the D, arriving at the destination, that we can appreciate that there's going to be more bridges.
Yeah.
There are always going to be more bridges. There are going to be more challenges for us in terms of being stuck and getting unstuck and moving across another bridge to a greater version of ourselves. And so for me, what is most satisfying is if I've worked with someone and they've created change in their life, and I know that years down the road, the work that we did and the changes that they made that often were not easy have been sustained. For example, a couple months ago, I was in a thrift store and I was tootling around looking at stuff, and this lady starts, chatting with me, and we're talking about, the stuff. And I said to her, I said, "You look so familiar." And she said, "You do too." And we realized that she had been my client, right?
Wow.
And this was like 10, 15 years ago. And it was so funny because we caught up about where her life was now, and lots of different changes, but the changes that she had made back then had served her to having a better quality of life now. Wow. And that was so unexpected. It's so delightful and so rewarding. So when I know, and I have those opportunities sometimes people will just contact me, and just to know that the work that they did, that they invested, was sustained and built upon, very, very satisfying.
That's great because it's so invigorating to know that people when they take those steps, and it gives better examples for others behind them, if you will, that once they take those steps, here are some results you can see. Of course, results vary according to people's, whatever they do, but that idea that it's possible. And I think that's the greatest thing that you offer is the possibilities are there. Um,
Absolutely.
great stuff. Well, how does hope and vision help people to be freed?
Well, without hope, the people perish.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. I've read that
Hope,
book.
hope is so essential in our lives, and it is one of the most painful, difficult human experiences when there is an absence of hope,
Yeah.
because life doesn't feel like worth living.
Hmm.
And we live in a world right now that is so freighted with fear,
Yeah.
and we've come through some years of challenges and trauma and loss, and people are so afraid to hope that things will get better. But I think our hope, our trust, our faith is really about knowing that we have been created with what I call internal resources we never knew we had in order to create what we never knew we could.
Hmm.
And I say that as a kind of byline, but it is so true.
Right.
And the longer that we live, the greater treasures we have internally.
Yeah.
And that is so important in the change process. People will sometimes say, can older people change? And I say, oh my gosh, you have no idea. Like right now, in the clients that I'm seeing, I have one that is 16 years old and I have another one that's 83.
Wow.
And they're in the change process. And it's very different when you're 16,
Yeah.
right? Because your world is ahead of you and, the possibilities. When you're 83, you're in the winter of your life.
Yeah.
And there are things that maybe you think, I want to attend to this before I go. I want to
Yeah.
be at peace with this. I want to make this change. I want to resolve this. And so hope is so important, to be able to trust that we have the resources we need, to be curious enough to ask good questions, to make better choices.
Right.
And older people have more resources because they've been around longer. They
Right.
have more internal resources, more life experience. And so they're actually in a better place because they can draw on the richness of that internal experience.
Well, great. That is something. Wow. Your explanations and so forth are very enlightening. So thank you for doing that, Susie. Where can people find out more about you and how to get in touch with you? Tell us your website and all that so they can make sure they get a hold of you.
Absolutely. My website is freedfromstuck.com. And there are lots of resources on there. If you're interested in a consultation, you can sign up there. My book is available on Amazon, or you can get it through my website as well. But there's just lots of good content there, even just in terms of your own self-education.
Yeah, she's got her podcasts out there. She's got, information about the book. So check out the website. I love those inspirational moments that you have in there too with the gecko. Is it a gecko or a lizard?
I think
Or
it's an
it's otter. You're
it's an
right.
otter.
Otter.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry
The
about that.
otter be freed from stuck.
That's right. Yeah. So some cute, nice, inspirational quotes in there as well, and some things to think about. So check out our website, freedfromstuck.com. So, and we'll put that all in the show notes so we have that information, Susie. But I want to thank you for taking the time today for being a guest on the Encouragement Engineering podcast. I really appreciate your insight and the hope and the light you're giving people. So thank you so much for doing what you do.
You're very welcome. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Susie. I appreciate it. You have a great day.
You as well.